We should be eating food that we've been eating for millions of years. We should be eating wild food. So the wilder the food, the better. Dandelion greens. You can't snuff it out even if you want to. Those dandelions will grow in the most amazing circumstances. Burdock root, all of these things, wild foods that have a voracious virility to them. Eat fertile foods and be more fertile yourself. Jubb, and this is Dr. David Jubb, my husband. And today we're going to be talking about our training program, which is called Whole Brain Functioning. So all things that allow us to live more in the whole of ourselves. And it's a pretty diverse and broad area. So we're going to try to give you some of the insights, that key pieces that you can use as tools in your daily life. So David, why don't you give us a little insight on, and actually what is whole brain functioning? Why do we call it whole brain functioning?
Well,
and then what is it?
Well, we were looking around also to come up with a theme which really is about this work, and so we decided we would call this whole brain functioning. Whole referring to both psychological and physiological patterns that allow us to live in the whole of ourselves. Brain reflecting this aspect of ourselves involving leadership, and that there's neurology that's involved in our behaviour that create whole brain functioning, and functioning in the whole brain functioning relating to this aspect of ourselves that involves a relationship that we have with each other and the earth in a manner that we have a sustainable future. So whole brain functioning is about verbal and non-verbal patterns that allow us to live in the whole of ourselves.
Okay, so people are pretty clear usually on what the verbal aspect is, right? And so what are some of the non-verbal aspects of whole brain functioning, about communication?
Well, certainly how the body is used. I heard Annie say that the body is the mind's experience of itself, and that we perceive everything through the use of our body. The viewers at home might be interested to know that the more that we quieten our breath down, the more carbon we end up having in ourselves, and carbon is a major force which holds the magnetic energy in our body. So there are patterns in our way of being on a kinesthetic or feeling level which allow us to live more in the whole of ourselves. And I just gave you one example. Another example, of course, using breath again, is that there's a big difference between a breath that's like this. A breath like this, and a breath like this. There's energy in that first breath. In that last breath, there's hardly any energy at all. And so, we build energy, and that when that river was allowed to meander, there was enormous energy in the ground pushing the earth. This energy was rising up. This energy, like a bioelectric energy, feeds life on the earth. And when they would have straightened that river out, it lost all of its energy, basically. And so there's patterns, physiological patterns that allow us to live more in the whole of ourselves. We have talked about food. We've said that having an alkaline energy causes us to feel a little bit more elevated in ourselves and high. Having acidic persons feel generally bitter and angry sometimes, whereas sweetness is really more about alkalineness.
Isn't Lovely.
So there's lots of things actually that it's possible for us to actually go into when we talk about whole body calibration and analog sculpting, which is how the body is used to access state-specific behavior.
Right. So to get into some of the calibration actually too, because David and I take people away on retreats, and part of what we do is actually setting up novel environments, like games and things that people can play, and then we just stand back and watch how people participate, and you can track a person's behavioral patterns and know quite a bit about their history and how they're going to act in the future by how they act in that novel task. So why don't we talk a little bit about whole body calibration and what whole body calibration is.
If we could talk a little bit about some patterns actually, that is whole brain, that is about verbal patterns and ways of thinking about things, that would be really nice, because actually it would be nice for us to actually do a total show on whole body calibration and analog sculpting. Annie has mentioned actually that we have a training program. It's probably amongst the most sophisticated training on the earth. If you're interested in leadership patterns, you're interested in becoming a better public speaker, you're interested in being a better parent, having parenting skills, language skills, and skills communicating on the other than conscious, this training program probably is amongst the most sophisticated program in the world like this. And Annie said that we use novel tasks, and we use adventure-based medium, and we bring people into play environments and things like this. Because if we elicit a large enough population of cells, we elicit resourcefulness, we can collapse any stuck state into this. And resourcefulness is a major component of the kind of change work that we do. Because it may as well be done in fun and elegance. And when we incite people to play games and things like this, people bring with some culminating forces that they would ordinarily bring to a task, some task when they were bringing the whole of themselves. And so it's possible really to be able to get an idea through play, people's process, their total process.
Yes,
so
this is very interesting.
How somebody opens and closes a door, how somebody plays, how somebody begins, how somebody ends some sort of a sequence or something. Whether people actually take too much help to do some task or not enough help actually, they want to do it themselves. It's amazing actually that there's some culmination of those patterns intrinsically that we are ordinarily bringing to some task. People do bring to a task when it's in a play environment. You're able to kind of witness all of these patterns basically.
Mm-hmm. And so, and group dynamics is very interesting too, how people participate in the group, whether they have a really excellent idea and they offer it to the outside of the group, right? You often see that. There'll be the whole group really involved in the process. And somebody will have a brilliant idea and they'll turn around to the outside of the group and they'll say, oh, well, we should just do it this way. And so that's something that David and I are really tracking, really paying attention to. Who offers those ideas to the center of the group? Who offers them to the leader or the person who everybody sort of offers ideas to?
Well, actually, our patterns, a good leadership typically has very specific patterns, actually, so people are listening. I would like to actually get to a couple of other things, which really is about thought patterns and things like this. And we really hardly have talked about any whole brain teachings, whole brain functioning teachings.
Excellent, let's do it.
And for the viewers at home, you should know that there are preferred ways of sorting information, and these preferred ways can either allow us to be living more in the whole of ourselves, or it can have been using limited neurology and limited brain function. We have like a platform teaching in whole brain functioning, which really this platform teaching, we get to this base camp more or less before we actually get to the mount, which really is excellence and unconditional being. And this base teaching, which is a major teaching in whole brain functioning, is about non-projection. It's about living in unconditional being. And so what is this non-projection? Non-projection is where you're in your being at one, and your behavior, if there ever was any behavior that was about somebody else changing, this is what Annie and I call in whole brain functioning projection. So after people have wanted somebody else to change and there was some behavior, that what your behaviour was about somebody else changing, typically people have to wash their energy fields after this. And there's an enormous cost of energy. People have to go to the movies, they have to go out and maybe have a good dinner or something, they have to go out and do some chanting or go to the church, or, they do all kinds of things, to actually wash their energy fields. And so there's a great savings of energy when people can be realised on this level, and you can come from a place of not having to act. And we're able to actually get everything done from this place of not having to act. But when somebody actually has inside of them, well, they've got to act this out, they've got to do this, it's like there really isn't any choice. And as listeners, we love it when you, the speaker, is at home giving us, the listeners, choice in what we're listening to. So whole brain functioning, this base camp, before we get to the mount in whole brain functioning, is about unconditional being, and it's about living in non-projection, non-projecting. So wherever it is that somebody, through their behaviour, has wanted somebody else to change, Annie and I call this projection, and typically people have to wash their energy field after this.
Right. That's so interesting.
There's so many patterns, right?
Yeah.
It would be impossible for us to kind of cover all the patterns.
We're just covering a few that we can get to today, yeah.
One other pattern would be frame things positively. That every single word we use has a physiology, and it's possible to access the whole of our brain more as we are focused more on framing things positively. Clear thinking, I know we're just about running out of time. I hope we've really said some really interesting things here today. Clear thinking, and this will be kind of the last thing that I say, clear thinking involves good word usage.
Right. So stay tuned, because in the next half of the show we're going to be talking more about language and what we call the language of peace. And this is Annie and David Jubb for The Universe Inside Our Mind. Stay tuned.
Did you know that I drink my urine every single day? And I'm careful not to spill a single drop.
you know that every single word that we use has a physiology, and that we live what we speak, and that we speak what you live next, and that every single word that we speak has a physiology? It is interesting that research shows that as the pleasure system is firing in the brain, it neurologically inhibits the aversive componentries of the brain. So as somebody's feeling pleasure and interest, they less than can feel aversive at the same time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Universe Inside Our Mind. I'm Annie Jubb. This is Dr. David Jubb. And good thinking, or clear thinking, always involves good word usage. And so this part of the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about what we call the language of peace, which is how to frame things positively and why it's important neurologically to do so. We found that research shows us that when we use positivity, we use words of inclusion and possibility, that we actually have access to more of the whole of our brain. And then when we use other words like negativity and exclusion and nots and can'ts and so on, that we only have access to about a third of the brain. So this is very exciting stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about it, David?
Well, it's pretty amazing because I've studied with some of the top neurologists in the world, Robert Heath from Tulane University. It's pretty amazing actually that researchers can sometimes have discovered things but not know quite actually how to interpret this work actually. But anyway, what Heath found at Tulane University, that as the pleasure system in the brain is firing, it neurologically inhibits the aversive componentry of the brain. So once you're feeling pleasant and you're feeling happy and you're really sparked up, your less than can be feeling down and out at the same time. That's impossible.
So you can only be feeling pleasurable feelings at any one time, or aversive feelings at any one time, and varying degrees of this. I mean, there's all these shades of gray in between it. What about that?
Actually, it might be interesting for people to know where the pleasure system is in the brain, and where the aversive system is. Actually, it's possible for me to actually point this out actually by using your brain. But what did you ask? You said what? You want me to, what do you want?
I was just saying, reiterating kind of what you said about people can be in a pleasurable state or they can be in an aversive state. But there can't really be a mixture of the two. Isn't that what you were saying?
Well, not really. There can be a cheerless kind of a happiness, which takes the place of happiness, in the maniac depression. The mania part of the depression is characterized by a cheerless kind of a ness. So it is possible that somebody can be in the aversive componentry and be using an element which is kind of like cheer, but it actually is a cheerless kind of a happiness, basically. We all know the difference at home. We all know the difference between humour, which is based on our basic goodness, and humour, which really is putting other people down.
Yeah, it's interesting for me actually I watch very little commercial television, and the TV that I do watch is so appalling to me because there's a huge projection out there, a paradigm that we're living inside of, that says that put downs and sarcasm and in fact very gross very gross put downs to people is actually humor. And if you look at humor that was aired on television and in the radio in the 1960s, late 60s and stuff, like Bob Newhart had a show, and I remember watching or listening to a radio show that he had done at that time. The humor was really about funny things. It was about funny things that people do or say, or and now what's commonly out there is that people will, it's just put downs. It's like, hey, you stupid. And even if it's like the mother talking to the son, often enough those are very, in comedies and stuff, those are where the most put downs come out. And it's so turned, it's so torqued from what I think true humor is. So anyway, a lot of this research is kind of what we're about.
It is amazing actually when we do research and we look into humor. It is amazing actually. We will do a show on Sexually Rigged, which is another major teaching in whole brain functioning. So stay tuned for that, which is about how sexuality is rigged in this present convention, and sexual power is bestowed on her, and he is made basically sexually powerless.
Right, and language has a lot to do with
it is interesting that when you listen to humour, women's humour is one-upmanship typically and about superiority, and men's humour typically is a put-down on themselves, basically. It is interesting also, I mean, you know, his body is used for battery and her body is used for attraction in this present paradigm. And this is kind of like about sexual rigging. But anyway, getting back to language of peace, this is the idea actually that wherever we have peace in the world, we have a language for peace. It is interesting that in our last presidential election, our candidates came before the people and they said, I don't think. And they proceeded to tell us something they don't think.
I love that.
They also, our presidential candidates came before us and they said, I don't believe. And then they proceeded to tell us something that they don't believe. And now maybe you're at home and you're thinking to yourself, what is it that you do think? What is it that you do believe? Because what you do think and what you do believe is really only one thing. And what you don't think and what you don't believe can be 1,000 million things, actually. So focus on what you do feel. Focus on what you do believe, rather than what you don't believe and what you don't think. So the faculty to inspire, creative influence of the future involves framing things positively and coming more from resourceful physiology, focusing on what the resource is that you want, focusing on what the outcome is, rather than having focused on what you don't want, what the problem is, what the limitations are.
Right.
What the very first camp of people focusing on what the resources are, what we want, are going to be streets in front of the people who are focused on what we don't want and what we want to get rid of. And basically, you know, I've sat in on peace negotiations at the United Nations and other places like that in the world, and I've got to say that something was often sadly lacking. This faculty to inspire creative influence of the future was hardly present at all. And when we've had some major crises going on, people have not been dancing eye to eye with each other. People are not dancing cheek to cheek. You know, they've prepared something and they're just reading from something they prepared. They hardly are communicating with people eye to eye. And this is the way to connect. We should really be communicating from our hearts, and we should be listening with our hearts, realizing that what's often spoken may less than really be what it is that is what we care to communicate from our heart. So we should all be really listening to each other's heart, basically, and tuning into what the intention basically is, realizing that possibly what's being spoken may less than be an accurate representation of the territory.
Right, and in fact, sometimes it's so abstract, it's just amazing, isn't it, right? English affords us the greatest ability to be abstract. And children are great teachers in this regard because a kid will, up until the age of, about 6 or something, they'll follow the directions specifically. So when you look at things like embedded commands in language, if you look at the child and, they've got a piece of gum or something and the mom says, when you're done with that, or father says, whatever, when you're done with that, don't swallow the gum. And the kid kind of goes, because swallow the gum was there. Even the word don't in front of it doesn't take it out of its, the embedded command of, swallow the gum. So it's very good to say, when you're done with that gum, spit it out. Spit it out. And there's a 6-year-old or a 2-year-old inside of each one of us, actually, that can really appreciate that straightforward language. That language that says exactly what it needs to say, and it doesn't flip-flop around.
Annie and I we call this the language of peace, this inner standing, having this inner standing. If you have this inner standing at home and you are practicing framing things more positively and realizing the benefit of this, you are living in what Annie and I call the age of enlightenment. And all peoples still having framed things aversively and focused on what they don't want, and less than awareness of this age of enlightenment, are living in what Annie and I call the age of aversion. And in the thousands of years to come, they will look back on this era and they will see where this change started to occur.
Yes, it's very true. And so in our writings, for example, we have gone to elaborate lengths and degrees to remove all negativity, or there was never any negativity in the beginning.
We go to great lengths to frame things positively.
To frame things positively,
because the first thing out of your mouth is first, and the second thing is always second. That's really interesting. What is primary comes out first, and what is second, actually. You know, in the sequence of things that it comes out.
And language is just so interesting to me anyway. Even the words this, which paces something close to self, or the word that, which paces it away.
Yes.
So good things we say this to, and things that we want to keep a little distance from, we can say that to.
It is so amazing, actually, that, you know, we live in a world where people are acting on other people. We just started out this program by saying we're talking about living in unconditional being. And there's just so many therapy and counselling where people are being acted on, you know. People are hardly party to their own process, you know. People are getting acupuncture, they're getting acted on. They're getting all kinds of adjustments and things like this, and people are acting on others. And this is a major form of disempowering other people. I mean, we have to ever be mindful to make sure that you at home are party to your own process, and that you are caring to make some fundamental change in your life. And if you're like Annie and I, then you're way less. You're shedding away any path and having a set way yourself. You're wayless, and yet you're looking around at the ways of others. That's excellent, and you're adopting this.
Great. Well, we're going to have to end it there here today. My name is Annie Jubb. This is Dr. David Jubb. This is the Universe Inside of Our Mind. You can catch us live in Manhattan if you're in the East Coast at 208 West 13th Street every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. This is a free lecture. It's open to everyone, and it's our giveaway to the people, our expression of our love. So come on down and join us, and have a really, really healthy and beautiful day. Check this out. The body is the mind's experience of itself. As above, so below. So to experience pride, we have to throw our shoulders back, give the lungs and the heart experience forward. And so you at home, sitting there in your seat, throw your shoulders back, put your feet flat on the ground, lift your head up, take a deep breath in, and relax. We